Welcome back, everyone. It's Kelly with Women for One, and I am so honored and excited to be here with one of my teachers and one of the world's greatest, to me and to many people, spiritual leaders, Marianne Williamson. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you.
Marianne, for those of you that don't know, and I would assume that most people have heard of Marianne, has over 10 published books. She's an author, a lecturer, a spiritual leader, and we're very excited that you've announced your candidacy for U.S. Congress. So I wanted to start with that and ask you, what does this mean for the country, and why did you decide to step into the political arena?
Well, I think that the quest of our lives is to become more conscious ourselves, to live from a greater place of love and self-actualization to the best of our ability, and to take that into the world. And a more enlightened conversation about what it means to be most deeply human and what our moral responsibilities are to each other, to the earth, to future generations, and so forth, is a conversation that has saturated so much of our civilization. It has changed religion and spirituality. It has changed medicine. It has changed many sectors of business. It has changed education. It has changed so many areas of our society already. But one place where you do not yet see a more enlightened conversation is the area of politics, to say the least. Politics, our system of politics today, is so dominated by calcified thought forms that even though I think there's a real movement inside the hearts and minds of the American people, we've always been a people on the go. The problem is not with the people. The problem is that this is one area where the more cutting edge enlightened conversation is not taking place. The system mitigates against it, namely the undue influence of money and the way two major political parties have a kind of chokehold on the public discourse. So that's not a situation that we can transform without engaging it.
Right.
There's a lot of conversation around a transformational politics, but if we just have that conversation from the sidelines, it's just talk. The kind of transformation that is necessary can't occur unless we ourselves engage the system. And that means to me, online petitions aren't enough. NGOs aren't enough. They're important, nonprofit organizations, all of this kind of activism is very important. But I think those of us who want to see compassion at the center of everything, not just seen as some lightweight force, but as the idea that rules all things that work. I think that those of us who wish to see humanitarian values placed before short-term economic values as the ordering principle of our society, those who believe that the health and well-being of the planet and of the people who live there should trump the interests of a small sector of our society and their economic concerns. Those of us who feel that government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Lincoln said, has already transitioned into government of a few of the people, by a few of the people, and for a few of the people. And most particularly who feel that's not going to change unless the people themselves change it. For those of us who feel that way, I think we all feel called to whatever action would represent that in our own lives. And for me, that calling is to run for office, so I am.
That's so beautiful, and I guess where I'm coming from also is I'm a mom, I'm a citizen, I've been on my spiritual path for many years, and I feel like I'm an intelligent woman.
Right.
But I'm not informed. I'm apathetic to the political system, and I know you've spoken to this.
Right.
I think there's a lot of women. I mean, I have a team member in Egypt. She's 23.
Right.
She's more politically informed than I am.
Oh, I'm sure she is. An Egyptian woman would be likely to be far more informed than you.
Much more informed. So how do we address that, the apathy?
Well, first of all, I hope that you recognize it as a character defect of your own at this point.
It is.
Yeah, okay, as long as we get that.
I'm owning it, and I'm really wanting to be more
So
informed.
what we have is a situation in which politics has become a spectator sport.
Right.
The difference between you and the young woman in Egypt is she knows that her life depends on it. So does yours.
Yes.
But the system would have you not recognize that. Now, the system has two categories of dysfunction. One is that there is a kind of lockout. There's a financial lockout that makes it very difficult for the average person to run for office. There's a media lockout in how many of our media outlets are owned by just a few corporations with their own agenda and their own viewpoint about what's really happening. There's a lockout in the sense, as I mentioned before, of the way the two major parties kind of have a chokehold on the public discourse. And there is a lockout in actuality in terms of the undue influence of money on our political functioning, which makes a certain level of cynicism absolutely legitimate.
Right.
On the other hand, the average person, yourself included in this case, conspire with the lockout.
Absolutely.
By allowing yourself to be uninformed. I mean, you can get on the internet and read about things if you want, because it shouldn't stop there.
Okay.
You know, that's the point. One of the things I feel about my campaign is that it's not just my taking a step, it's everybody who's involved taking a step. You know, the old kind of allopathic politics, it's the same kind of transition as we took in medicine, from an allopathic to a holistic model.
Right.
We no longer just look at the doctor and expect the doctor to fix it. We know that we are responsible for the cultivation of health. We know that we are responsible through nutrition, through lifestyle choices, through exercise and so forth, to cultivate health. And even if we do get sick, we can't just expect the allopathic medical practitioner to you know, try to eradicate or suppress the symptoms. Our own issues psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually are factors in ameliorating the disease.
Right.
Same is true and is happening now in politics. We can't just look at politicians and expect them to fix it. We ourselves must see our own role as citizens as absolutely critical to protecting the foundational principles of brotherhood, justice, and love to begin with. Not just wait till all hell breaks loose and go, well, what's happening? That's where we are now. We are now recognizing and reaping what we have sown by allowing ourselves to be as disengaged as we have been. And I think what's happening now is Americans are looking around and going, what's happening here? It's the 11th hour. But when Americans wake up from this kind of stupor, because that's what you're talking about. You were saying you're apathetic. We all just went to this kind of la-la land stupor. You know, when you were talking about the woman in Egypt, when a woman is pregnant, you know, and you are a mother, people say, you're eating for 2. Well, you and I, as American women, are speaking for 10. We're speaking for 100.
Yes.
I mean, think of the women in the world who don't have a fraction of the political permission to speak their minds,
right,
who only have a fraction of the permission that we have to go wherever we want to do and do whatever we want to do, go wherever we want to go. So I think American women should be a moral force.
And it's our responsibility.
As conscious human beings.
Right.
I mean, we can't be conscious about food, conscious about spirituality, conscious about parenting, conscious about everything but politics, when politics is an area that affects all of our lives. And if we want to bequeath to our children, as I know you do, some of the great blessings of this country that were bequeathed to you, then it behooves you, as it behooves all of us, to awaken from whatever stupor and whatever distraction and whatever apathy, which I doubt was really apathy. It's just this kind of paralysis that sets in.
I don't really know what's going on.
Exactly.
That's what it feels like. It's like, well, we really don't know what's going on, so
well,
we'll wash
that's
our
an
hands
easy
of it.
that's an easy cop out. Yeah. Well, I hope that you'll get involved in this campaign, and that the campaign will be a kind of educational process for you. That's how I see it. It's not just about electing one woman to Congress. You know, that's the old allopathic transactional model of politics. What we need now is a transformational politics, where it's all of us involved and on every level of our being.
And that's what you did with Sister Giant.
Yes, and I see this campaign as the next step, because after Sister Giant, which was a marvelous experience. Were you there?
No, I wasn't, but I read about it and I heard
2,000 women from all 50 states. It was called Sister Giant, Women, Nonviolence, and Birthing a New American Politics. With all that energy and all that enthusiasm, I had to ask myself, what is my highest response to this energy? What do I do with this? And what came for me after a year of very serious inquiry within myself and with my closest friends and family is for me to run for office myself. And I hope that this campaign will be a template of sorts, so that other people who are interested in running on these same kinds of issues will see it as a way in for them as well.
Well, and it's just another consciousness, is what you're saying.
Well,
we're conscious about our bodies, we're conscious about our
spirit.
We can't
be selectively conscious.
Right, we
and
can't
be
be
conscious.
And I think you've kind of answered
By
the
definition.
question, but I do want to ask this. I have a couple of friends and dear colleagues and authors that have their own following, and I asked Annie Burnside. She wrote a book called Soul to Soul Parenting. She's from Chicago. She had a question, and it was so eloquent. I just want to read it because it mirrored how I was feeling, and I think there's a lot of women out there that feel this way.
Okay.
She said, I've always wondered Marianne's take on why it's so important to, and this is the spiritual side, fix the dream state. If we know as we do when we awaken that it is just that, a dream state. I struggle with the need for spiritual activism. From a human perspective, I often feel the call. From a spiritual perspective, I do not. As a conscious blended being of the two, I see both sides clearly and only speak out and act when I really feel moved to. Just wondering how she's determined that spiritual activism is necessary.
There is no serious, genuine spiritual perspective or spiritual path which gives you a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. Only middle-class Americans could have come up with this nonsense. The fact that this is a dream state, the fact that this is ultimately a mortal hallucination, is correct on a theological basis, but as the Course in Miracles says, don't foster level confusion. Do you think that if you saw people taken from this room right now to be sold in slavery, or you saw people taken from this room right now and put into concentration camps, that the spiritual response would be just to get into a yoga position and say a few ohms?
Right.
There is nothing spiritual about that. The ego loves talk about religion. The ego loves talk about spirituality. So that which is the idea that this is all a mortal illusion is correct. However, that does not mean that we are not to address it. The Course in Miracles says our job, you do not go from what is now the unhappy dream to awakening. You go from an unhappy dream, the Course in Miracles says, to a happy dream. So because this is all an illusion, even when all the children are fed, and 17,000 children are not starving every day, even when the unbelievable amount of unnecessary human suffering is completely healed, it will still be a dream, but it will be the happy dream. And then humanity can awaken. You can't skip that step.
It's just beautiful, right?
And I want to be clear, I didn't mean that the person who asked that question was the quote-unquote middle-class American who came up with that. It's just a mainstream American trend that makes everybody in the world just roll their eyes about us.
Right.
And like, what are you thinking?
And so globally, how will this political transformation affect women all over the world?
You mean how will this kind of transformation in America?
Yes.
It happens, you know, you heal in any area of your life one aha at a time. I hope you're having an aha. You know, having this conversation.
Yes.
That's how we heal. We go, yeah, that's true. That's how we heal in life, whether it's somebody talking to us about how we are in personal relationships, talking to us about what we're doing with our lives. I remember many years ago, I wrote this in one of my books, many years ago. It was a friend of mine named June. And I was complaining, and I was so unhappy, and I was whining. And she said to me, I don't mean to offend you or insult you, but do you ever do anything for anybody else?
I read that, actually.
It was like brick to my forehead.
Yep.
It had not really dawned on me that I wasn't here by myself, and that I couldn't find happiness in only being here for myself. Now, you are a mother, and I do believe that those raising young children do get a pass on a lot. I do, because I think it's the front lines of everything. However, I think this is a moment of all systems breakdown. All hands are needed on deck. And there are so many ways that all of us can be involved no matter what. I believe that American women should be a moral force in the world. There are things happening on this planet which, if American women in concert said, oh no, that stops now, would stop now. That's how powerful the US government is. And if we would wield more of the power that we actually have. You know, sometimes as women, from a kind of feminist perspective, we are always talking about the power we don't yet have that we need. And it is true that certain issues still need to be addressed. I'm not saying that there aren't more issues to be addressed. However, I think there's also something here about the ownership of the power that we have and the use of the power that we have. You know, this isn't a time for the audacity of hope. This is time for the audacity to wield power.
And take action.
Oh, you can't wield power without taking action.
Right, take action. And that's what, when Women for One was created, that's what it was about. It was about sharing stories, sharing what you've been through, sharing your wisdom so that other women could hear that you're not alone. But more importantly, taking action around that, making the next steps in your lives.
Well, it is not either or, external or internal. It is both
right.
and.
Both
because some things, and I think that this is a large part of what women bring to the table now. You were talking earlier about some women in some Middle Eastern countries. A woman was telling me, whose husband used to serve in Congress, she was telling me that when they were in Washington, that she formed a kind of healing group with women who were wives of ambassadors from some Middle Eastern countries, from Muslim countries, and they would sit in silence and in mindful practice. So I'm not saying that the external activism is instead of the internal.
It
is both and. Martin Luther King said the externalized political goal of the civil rights movement was the desegregation of the American South, but that the ultimate goal was the establishment of the beloved community. So it's not, do I meditate or do I act? It's the
both.
Fact that there are a lot of hours in the day.
Wow. Integrating them both.
Thank you. You can do one in the morning and one in the afternoon.
Well,
hello.
It sounds like you're doing a lot.
I'm trying.
You're doing a lot. So
As
what
are
can
you.
we do to support you?
Well, you're
What
already
can our
doing
community
it.
do?
You're already doing it. This is a moment of such, you know, every cell in the body has a natural guidance system by which it is led to become that which it is created to be, collaborating with other cells, created to be what they are meant to be, in synergistic activity in order to support the highest functioning of that organism. A cell that decides not to do that, a cell that disconnects from its natural programming, is called cancer. And what has happened on this planet is we are under the sway of a malignant thought system, which has us enthralled with the idea that it's just about me rather than we. And the malignant cell threatens not only the organism it is created to serve, but also threatens its own life. And there's an awakening now. And just as one cell is created to support the healthy functioning of the spleen, and one of the latter, and one of the muscles, and one of the bones, you are meant to do what you're meant to be. I'm meant to do what I'm meant to be. Somebody behind the camera is meant to do what they're supposed to do. Each of us are guided. The content in all of us is equal, but the form through which we express that equal content has to do with the natural propensities and talents and desires of the individual.
Right.
And the more you meditate and the more you pray, the more you feel intuitively where you're meant to be and what you're supposed to do. God doesn't give me instruction for your life.
Right.
God doesn't give you instruction for my life. But just as every cell receives a natural internal guidance, so do we. When we live lives where meditation, wisdom, mindfulness, whatever words you use for these things now, is what rules our sense of purpose and action.
And what personally brings you peace from a more human perspective? Personally, like what brings you peace daily?
What brings me peace is practicing what I preach. When I practice what I preach, my life really works. When I don't practice what I preach, it doesn't. If I forgive, I feel peaceful. If I withhold love and forgiveness, I don't feel peaceful. If I try to show up in my most excellent, you know, as well as I can, I feel good about myself. If I don't, I won't feel good about myself. These laws are impersonal. The laws of karma, the laws of cause and effect are impersonal. So I feel peace when I am centered within my most compassionate self, and I act that way. And when I don't, no matter what I do, I won't feel peace.
It's so funny you're saying that, because I was on the plane coming down here reviewing a Return to Love for like the 10th time. And I came across, you know, now that I'm in this space in my life, I thought about this interaction with this person that I'm having right now, and I read about forgiveness, and I read about letting it go and having peace. And I just intuitively, like, if I'm gonna walk this walk, I mean, I'm make some shifts. So I sent an email, I send you peace, I send you love. And I felt peace.
Absolutely.
But I watched my ego like, no, don't do that. And I went, that's fear.
Right.
The opposite of love is
Right.
fear. And I just reread
Because your
Eternal.
ego, your ego thinks what would bring you peace is if that person falls off a ladder or
Yeah,
something.
right.
That's what your ego says. But forgiveness is the crux of the attainment of inner peace. Without forgiveness, we cannot be at peace. And there's a reason for this, because when I'm angry at you and I'm not forgiving you, it's because I'm identifying you with your mistake.
Right.
I can't identify you with your mistake without identifying me with my mistakes. So as long as I hold you as guilty, I will feel guiltier. To the extent to which I'm willing to overlook and to know who you are is bigger than the mistakes you made. To that extent, I'm able, through the laws of consciousness, to experience myself as bigger than my mistakes. I can't learn to really give myself some mercy unless I'm willing to give you some mercy. All this talk about I can't love anybody else until I love myself. Yeah, well, I can't love myself until I learn to love other people, because there's only one of us here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I always ask everyone this, and I've been waiting to ask you this. What is your definition of authenticity?
Oh, I don't know definition of authenticity.
Just
I know.
How do you define truth?
I believe. Well, how do I define truth?
Please,
I'll leave
Marianne,
that
tell me.
to Spinoza or somebody. How do I define truth? I know that to the extent to which I'm seeking to monitor myself. Come on, Marianne, lighten up. Come on, Marianne, get over yourself. Come on, Marianne, be a little more merciful here. Come on, Marianne, give them a break. Come on, Marianne, get off your butt and do something for somebody else. Come on, get off your chair. Don't be lazy. Come on, don't whine. Come on, don't stay stuck in the past. Come on, don't be ambitious for the future. Come on, ask yourself, how can I be of service to God and to humanity today? Don't fall into those neurotic patterns. Come on, Marianne. Don't act from your weakness today. Act from your strength. Come on, Marianne. You know where you're harsh in that area. You know where you made a mistake in that area. Atone for your mistake. Ask God to take away from you your harsh places. This is the inner work. And so sometimes, you know, a lot of times people define authenticity these days as how I really feel. How you really feel is not necessarily, because I could say, well, I really feel angry. But that is not authentically who I am. Who I authentically am is the love that is behind the veil of that anger. That anger is an embodiment, an expression of where some wires got crossed in my brain based on childhood wounding. But the real authentic self is always the love within us. So sometimes what feels like the natural self, this is how I really am, and this is how I feel. This is how I authentically am. That sometimes is not the true authentic self. And the true authentic self, which is just the love within us,
just love,
actually sometimes feels like, well, I don't think that's me, but it actually is. And the journey of our lives is to drop all the clutter that comes from
like that fear of sending that email and the
So you really did the work. The situation you described is the essence of it all. In that moment, it was a very powerful story you told. You didn't really feel like doing the forgiving thing. And too many times in our culture, we indulge our feelings too much. Sometimes you're feeling like you want to eat the whole, you know, what do you want? I want to eat all this ice cream. What do you really want? To lose some weight. So therefore, what is the authentic me? The one that has the appetite for the ice cream, or the one that wants to take better care of myself in a real way, and knowing that all that much sugar will not serve me? So what you did was very powerful. That's the inner work, where you go, I don't really feel forgiving in this moment, but I know that if I reach for the forgiving action, you know, sometimes in AA they talk about you can act yourself into a new way of thinking more easily than you can think yourself into a new way of acting. So
I love
that's
that.
very powerful.
I've heard that.
What you did, and like you said, a peace came over you.
It did.
Lighten up, get over it, get over yourself, forgive them, and move on, so that they can no longer impact you. To the extent to which I'm identifying someone with what they did to me, and within this world they might have done it, but to the extent to which I'm seeing what you did to me as real, then I will experience what you did to me as real. The only way I can no longer be at the effect of what you did to me is if I'm willing to see you as not, in essence, the person who did that. I always have a choice whether to perceive you as guilty, identifying you with your mistake, or to see you as innocent, which is identifying you with who you really are, and you just had a mistake and jerk moment. Who doesn't have moments when we act like jerks? But when I act like a jerk, I know I didn't wake up that morning going, I'm going to be a jerk today. No.
Right.
But we all, you know, we all fall. We all have our wounds. We're all in our process. And for us to learn to be more merciful towards each other.
And ourselves, right? I mean,
yeah, but, you know, once again,
it's the act.
Well, no, it's just that if I'm more merciful towards you, I'm going to find it far easier to be merciful towards myself.
Okay. I have to take that in and...
Well, you were more merciful towards that person.
Absolutely.
The story you told, you know, I've talked more, but you got right to the point.
Well, and I wanted to ask you, before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about your book, your newest book, The Law of Divine Compensation.
Thank you.
And I'm so excited about it. And when you brought up perception, it made me think of it. So can you talk a little bit about what the theme of the book is?
Yeah, and I have a new one coming out at the beginning, towards the beginning of the year. Yeah, it's called A Year of Miracles, daily devotions and reflections.
A Year of Miracles.
Law of Divine Compensation, I think so many of us, particularly since the latest economic meltdown a few years ago, most of us now have had the experience of some kind of lack, or at least fear of lack, when it comes to material things, and when it comes to money, when it comes to finances, when it comes to work. And for myself and for everyone I saw around me, I thought, all right, now how do you apply metaphysical principle to this?
Right.
And it has to do with that line in the Course in Miracles where it says, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And the phrase, the law of divine compensation, is just wording that I give to a particular way the universe operates. Namely, that wherever there is lack within the mortal realm, within the infinity of spiritual substance, there is an automatic compensatory action. Okay. Like if you program an address in your GPS in your car, and then you take a wrong turn, then the GPS will automatically recalibrate itself to tell you how to still get to the destination.
Right.
So no matter what you might have done to cause economic lack, or what somebody else might have done to cause economic lack, and a lot of times it was both of us, it was me and Wall Street, you know what I mean? Well, you know, there are a lot of factors in these things. No matter what, if it was other people, to learn to forgive, if it was ourselves, to learn to atone, and what that does is it resets the trajectory of probability. So that's what that book is about, is how to live in the zone, not only of abundance, but of the correction when lack is your material circumstance at that time.
I have this vision of this big grid, you know, where it kind of reassesses.
Exactly.
A couple of movies like that, where they had the map and it
That's exactly right,
it
and that's how the universe actually operates.
Yeah,
because the universe is this one big cosmic mind.
Wow. Well, thank you for explaining
you.
that. Do you have a few words of wisdom or just some advice for our community? Where there's people
Tell me
all
about
over
your
the
community.
world. We are women that are sharing their stories from all over the world. There's over 50 countries that have come and shared their truth and talked about issues or things that they've gone through in their lives, that they've experienced, that they've changed and shifted into the positive.
Okay.
And it's really exciting to hear these beautifully brave women share these stories and feel like they have a voice. And there's this one woman that her husband, he threw acid all over her and burned her and beat her in Africa. And I think it was in South Africa. And I send, and I have one for you, I send these little truth teller charms, and it says Women for One on it, to each of them. And she has a trach. And she sent me a letter and said, put it on her trach, and said, now I will always feel like I can speak my truth. Thank you for letting me tell my story. That was just, it moved me, because this is a movement that came through me. I wanted to just write.
Well, it's part of, you know, everybody's on the same vibe right now.
Right.
None of us are picking up anything unique. It's all part of you know, our own individual expressions of this great uprising of the heart. You know, I mentioned to you before that just as when you're pregnant, you're eating for two. Many women around the world, including the woman you just mentioned, are living circumstances and situations that most of us in our country can't even imagine. And people in other parts of the world, particularly women who are in very disempowered circumstances, must wonder sometimes what we're thinking. I saw a tweet once from some woman who said, any problem that Western women think they have is minuscule compared to the problem of women in countries like mine. And I remember I saw that tweet and I tweeted back, please know that many of us do realize that, and commend you so much for your courage.
It takes courage.
And she wrote back that she appreciated that. What I want to say, and I can't speak on behalf of every American woman, but I know that there are many of us. We want women in other countries, such as those you've talked about, to know that we, even if we didn't see yesterday, we see today. And we realize that as women of a Western industrialized society, we have a unique place and unique power and unique influence. And even though we might have been under this illusion that we really had no power, we realize now that that was just the ditziness of the former self. And we are committed in our hearts to do everything that we can. Because ultimately, it will not be enough just to hear their stories.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, we must do what we can collectively, not only individually through activism and so forth, which is important, but also collectively in terms of political sway, to place the humanitarian concerns of women and children throughout the world top rather than so close to the bottom of the socioeconomic and political agendas of our nations. And I know I feel committed to that because of how many stories of such stories I've heard, and I know that you are.
I feel it in my heart. More than I've ever felt when I read these stories, when I hear from these women. It's kinesthetic to me now, and it wasn't before. So I've awakened to this new place as well.
And that's why once you get there, there's no going back. We have a lot to do now, and all of us are being led to do what we can. And you tell those women on your site that a lot of us know this, and we are doing what we can. And in the days and the weeks and months and years ahead, we will be doing what we can, and we will not forget those stories, and we will act on them.
It's beautiful. And one thing you said, I was listening to something you said. You say Americans are slow to wake up sometimes.
Oh, but once we do,
it really kind of felt really. I get
the
really
rest of the
excited
world
when you
knows
said
that about us too. When we're asleep, they're just rolling their eyes, like, especially about us as women, like, what are you thinking? You think you have problems. But when America wakes up, when we get it wrong, it's a terrible thing because we're so powerful. But when we get it right, it's a beautiful thing. And that's what we need to do. We need to recreate politics and social action to express that politics itself can be a beautiful expression of our most beautiful selves. That's the authentic self. The authentic self is the beautiful self.
It's the beautiful self. It's the love. Thank you so much
for
today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and good luck with all you do.
Would you mind just doing a quick prayer to pray us out for the women?
Do it.
Thank you.
We join together, women from all over the world, and we pool at this time our yearnings, our hopes, our visions for ourselves, for our families, for our planet, for the world. We know that it will take miracles to bring forth the kinds of changes that are necessary. Changes in the human heart, changes in human behavior. But we know that such change and transformation is possible. We dedicate ourselves, and we ask that which is most holy and true and good, by whatever name we call it, to aid us, to uplift us, to guide us. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck with everything. We're so excited.
Thank you so much.